To go back to the basic questions that I was after, the
Hmm.
characters are in these woods, in the thickets. They have put up with a fearsome attack from a scary beast. They have perhaps any number of reasons now for their GM to be making rolls about what the witch may now know about them, what the uh, what the I'm now interested in why they're doing what they're doing. And you talked about protecting their community or trying to do something. There's going to become a point when they are acting with more direct confrontation of their problems.
Hmm.
And I'm real interested now in how that's conducted.
Right. So the way I try and orchestrate everything is they have bodies of knowledge that each particular character would have. And let's say they are climbing up the mountain and they have a few scanty legends that they're proceeding from, because what else can you do but
Right.
use what you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then I enjoy when they start discovering um, variations on the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So they had this legend, and it turns out to not be true, but then they find out, oh, this is why we ended up believing this, is because it was
Right.
some.
Oh, look, it is the saint. These are his bones, right here. You
That's
know.
right. Yeah,
So,
that's right.
okay, so
Um,
good. I think I have a feel. I have a
yeah,
feel for this kind of thing. So,
yeah.
um,
Um, and so it really is a question of how finding ways of delivering new information to them in a way that's not, here's an info dump, right, and now go. That's the other end of where I want to be.
right, exactly, exactly. No, I know what you mean, and I use this term. You may remember this terminology. It comes from the early Forge. Do you remember Bobby G at all? My Bobby G phrasing.
It's
It's
been too long.
right. No,
Sorry.
it's the whole business of the characters keep getting buffeted by weird encounters and meaningless clues, and they use every skill in the book, and they try their best, and they keep going around and around and around and getting false lead after false lead, and then sooner or later they meet Bobby G. And Bobby G could either be like a minor crime boss or a seedy investigator or a down on his luck but knowledgeable drunk, or um, an anonymous tip even. But Bobby G knows that it's going down at the warehouse tonight at midnight,
Mhm.
and Bobby G always shows up 2/3 of the way through the session, like clockwork. After we fucked around for all this time trying our sheet, trying to work our damn gears, right? But they don't
Right,
do
right.
anything. The point is those gears don't do anything. All that matters is that the pacing is dictated that now we get what we need to know to go do the thing.
Hmm.
And whatever information, clears up what is happening and how bad it's going to be is, occurs. And you can adapt this to any freaking fiction you want.
Right.
And it's it is in many ways deeply unsatisfying to me to realize that my character sheet doesn't do anything.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that's since it usually is accompanied by an info dump. Um, I guess you could also call it deep throat role playing, right?
Right.
And so um,
You're lost until suddenly
right,
here's everything.
finally here's the
Yeah.
so you end up with I think some method. You clearly have tried to avoid all of these things. I'm trusting at this point that causality is a big deal. What the players do have causal power or influence on things that then are responsive in ways that you decide what they are based on what they are and what's happening. In other words, you play your characters too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We
That's
play our
right.
characters, you play your characters too. And we
That's
go
right.
there. Yeah. So with that in mind, let's dial it forward. Get past all the good stuff. Unfortunately, skip all the good stuff. And now I'm looking at our group of characters, and I'm looking at them after much of the instability of the situation has finally played out. For lack of a better word, things are less entropic now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Crises have arisen, and things that were trembling on the edge of occurring have occurred. Consequences have occurred, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, different games do it in different ways. Some games do it strictly in terms of character portraiture. My character had a cheap sword, a cheap shield, a helmet that didn't fit, and, was 16. And if I drew his picture when I started to play, I'm talking about like a character in some other game, and I drew his picture before he started to play, and he would look like that. Well, 10 sessions in, he is now wearing, his temple armor. He has now got his serpent familiar coiled about his upper arm. He
Right.
now has, a scar down the side of his face, and his missing eye is replaced by a gem. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you want me to keep going, right?
No,
but
no.
the point is that now I've got my badass fantasy dude, and I am pleased
Right.
because I look at that first picture, and I
Yeah.
know the details of everything that's changed all the way along to this picture. So that's one way of tracking the kind of change I'm talking about, is through character portraiture.
Mm-hmm.
Other games do so in a more setting-oriented way. What has changed in the situation, in that location? Who has come to grief? Which of the NPCs was hanged? Which of the NPCs, is in love with, is now tagging along and, is my character's lover? Which of the NPCs, came to an untimely and undeserved end? Which of the, was the beast released?
Mm-hmm.
So the outcomes and the changes are a little bit more situational and less character based. A little bit less so, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really matter. There are lots of things, but whatever it is a change. We can look at the depiction, the mental depiction of something in the fiction, and it has changed because we did something, because we were there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can either talk about ourselves, we can talk about the overall. So in this one, let's do both. In this one, let's take my woodsman through quite a considerable set of play.
Mm-hmm.
We meet for, I presume we play for sessions and sessions, right? Okay.
Oh yeah, many.
Right.
Endless.
Excellent. Well, in that case, we're 20 sessions in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm there. I'm ready for the next game. I'm saying, Dan, we're keeping going, right? You're not that PhD, that dissertation, that wasn't really that important, right? We're playing on Wednesday.
Apparently not.
Yeah, exactly. So, with that in mind, what does my woodsman look like?
Probably the most significant change would be their face and their bearing, because they've been through hell. They started off, most likely, they started off in a very non-violent little world.
Right. The first portrait would have been him working.
Yeah, that's right. He was tilling a field
working.
and
right.
Yeah,
He's doing what he does. So now he meets with people periodically to check that the fires are lit on the hilltops, or something like that.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. It would be a hardening of the spirit in order to endure, this terrible shit of their world, and the world itself is really going to change by, again, good faith, cause and effect.
Right,
So
right.
they went up and they tried killing the witch. They ultimately found somehow where the witch was. And if they succeeded, then there's this series of changes. If they failed, there's some other series of changes. And so the only one that I can say dependably is the character has become harder, maybe in a good way, maybe in a bad way.
Right.
But the landscape is very much depending on what were the effects of their attempts.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. The crazy thing here is that we are seeing these changes, but as you have pointed out, do I ever even see my character sheet?
Oh yeah, each player gets to see their own character sheet with their list of skills. Yes.
Okay. And what about, so now what I'm going to do is say if I look at the sheet, the actual words and whatever on there,
Mm-hmm.
what's changed?
It's all skill based. There's no levels, no classes. Everything's just skills percentage, and the percentages in the right things, in the things that you've done the most, will rise.
Okay. What about the hardening that you talked about? Is that indicated
So
on there anywhere?
it is your willpower is one of the important stats, and this is a frequently referenced and for some gamers very troublesome attribute, because character players who say, well, I want my character to spy on this village for 12 hours while I lay in the woods.
Yeah, good luck.
And so we say, yeah, let's look at your willpower. How willing, because as you know, special forces, part of the training is you lie in that spot and you pee yourself, but
Right.
you don't move.
Right.
And so all willpower, and so your willpower will have risen considerably if you've been through enough hell.
Right.
Your willingness to go spelunking.
Right.
I'm not going in that hole.
Yeah,
Fuck no.
I'm with you. I mean, all right, everybody, let's go down that hole. No.
No. And so
See you later, Gandalf.
Exactly right. And so willpower is a big deal. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you've come across it in some of my over intellectualized verbiage in Circle of Hands. I mentioned that all of the attributes, regardless of the physicality of their names, all of the attributes are expressions of the will.
Oh, that's nice. I don't recall that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so with that known, okay, so I'm going to take it as a given. My character sheet is a mass of abilities and percentages, and there is an indicator of will. Is that also a percentage, or is it some other kind of numerical device?
No, it's one of the primary attributes. So it's different from skills, but all the attributes serve as the basis of your skill numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then we have, I would say, a pretty good look at these changes. The changes in the setting are however, also taken seriously, right? You also are saying my landscape has changed as the GM. Okay, so with that in mind, I now have a pretty good idea of saying, okay, what kinds of mechanics are going to serve this well? And one of your procedures, your methods, is simply to move all of the conduct of the mechanics over to the GM. And
well,
now,
what do you mean by that?
Well, the actual physicality of the role, the actual.
Oh, yeah. Well, just with regards to perceptions.
Okay, so I will be rolling for things like, hitting someone with my axe or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
And let's see. Now, does that mean I understand that when I say I hit someone with my axe, that it's a pretty straightforward thing? I see a lot of clarity when it comes to physical actions that are immediately identifiable as skill use. I'm interested, and there's no wrong answer, I'm just kind of interested for this game. Does the player ever invoke attribute use, like willpower in particular, but technically any of them?
It would all be through I want to do X or I try to do X.
Okay. So it is probably, I'm not going to say frowned upon. Let's just say it's not quite in the spirit of the game for me to invoke the sheet as an operational device and simply to talk about what I'm trying to do and leave it at that.
That's right.
Right. Okay.